They call it the life, but it's anything but ideal. Women intimidated, controlled by violent men, and then forced into prostitution.
And again, this content may be difficult for some viewers. Our Mike Bodette talked with one survivor who is now back on the streets by choice, trying to help others.
You've come a long way.
Yes. I think, though, if I didn't go through that part of my life, then I wouldn't be at this part of my life.
Chelsea Buckley is a survivor.
What are you doing?
Building relationships on the streets of Salem with people who are down and out.
I cannot confirm or deny, but he's a friend of mine.
Chelsea works as a case manager at LifeBridge, a shelter in Salem. She's also an outreach worker with the Salem Police Department.
It's important because most of the people out here think that nobody cares about them, and they feel hopeless, and I just remember feeling like that.
35-year-old Chelsea lived the lowest of lows. Her childhood in Lynn was tough. Both her parents died by the time she was 6.
I had a pretty bad drug habit, and then I became homeless.
Her memories are foggy, but she says she was somewhere around the age of 21. And things got even worse when she met her first trafficker.
I was like walking up the street one day and I met a guy who I didn't know was a pimp, and they offered to put me in a hotel room. They told me I had to work, so they drove me to Boston in the combat zone and dropped me off and told me I had to make a certain amount of money before I could come back.
And then when you had that $1,000, then what?
And then they take it. He would take it for me. And
All the money?
All of the money, yes.
What was that like for you?
It was scary. I was scared, and but drugs would take that away. But then when I would wake up in the morning and I wouldn't be high, I would be scared, and it wasn't something that I wanted to be doing. I just didn't see another option for myself.
After police arrested her, Chelsea agreed to go to a halfway house in Worcester, but she didn't stay long.
So I ended up leaving and going to Boston to try to get high. And I got in the car with someone, and it was like a party all the way until I got to New Jersey, and then I was being traded or sold.
You were trafficked?
Yeah, and I was being sold to, he was a gang member and a pimp and violent.
It was the start of an even more difficult time in Chelsea's life.
Then I had a gorilla pimp, they call him, where they physically beat you and mentally abuse you until you do what they want.
What he wanted was for Chelsea to work for him as a prostitute in the casinos of Atlantic City.
So my ID was taken, my name was changed to Rebecca, I didn't have a phone.
She says her trafficker did not want her using drugs because she could make more money if she was clean and sober. But Chelsea says she kept turning to drugs to cope.
He would beat me, badly, tell me to take my clothes off and beat me with a belt. And then he would always come back and hug me. It's like domestic violence, right? He would come back and hug me and tell me that, he just wants me to be, clean and sober, and that I was a junkie and nobody loved me and my family didn't care about me. So it became he was my only person. So he'd beat me and love me at the same time.
It went on for about 4 years. Chelsea was arrested more than 30 times. She ended up in Las Vegas because she was too well known to security in the Atlantic City casinos. How did you finally escape?
He ended up getting arrested in Nevada, and I didn't have anyone, so I went with another pimp, and I was allowed to do drugs with him. This guy was just way worse. He told me he'd kill me if I left, and he beat me so bad one day, and I called my aunt and told her. And she just wanted me home.
That was 2011. She's now living what they call the square life.
The square life means just normal, somebody who's not in the game of, pimps and girls and sex trading, and just a normal person.
Clean for almost 3 years now. Normal never felt so good. How is the square life treating you?
The square life is good. I like the square life.
And she's still in the square life, living the normal life, Mike?
She is. She's doing remarkably well.
That the phrase that got my attention was gorilla pimp.
Right.
That was very descriptive.
And it just tells you how intense these situations can be for these women. All of the women we interviewed say it's often vulnerable young women, those involved with drugs, or who come from broken homes who end up being trafficked, but it can happen to anyone. That's why the survivors feel it's so important to get out there to show strength and also to show there's a way out.
All right. Thank you, Mike.